Hello, I'm Pastor Nanette Christofferson, and along with Pastor Steve Talmadge, we offer these short Bible studies on our lectionary readings. This week, if you can believe it, it's already the second week of Advent, and we find ourselves in familiar territory as we look to the Old Testament and Isaiah chapter 11, 1 through 10. Our commentary this week is written by Corey Driver from the 2022 workingpreacher.org. So let's take a look at the beginning of Isaiah's prophecy. Isaiah's words were a cause of introspection and hope during the prophet's life in 8th century BCE, during Jesus' earthly life in the 1st century CE, and in our times as well. It has been important and life-giving to delve into why Isaiah's messages were so impactful for the original audiences that this scroll, presumably after some heavy editing, was being intensely scrutinized centuries later at the time of Jesus' incarnation. Let's take a look at Isaiah 11, 1 through 10. A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of its roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of understanding and wisdom, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw with the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. On that day the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious. Here we have just a beautiful vision, a vision of what it would be like to live on God's holy mountain, a holy vision of peace. The words of Isaiah 11 offer us a sense of hope for a time of peace and new potential in relationships between former enemies. Indeed, even serpents and humans, destined to crush and bruise each other, seem to receive a peaceful reprieve from their destinies. Though one wonders if the snake truly welcomed random babies' arm reaching into their nest. But to what is this vision of peace responding? Is this a temporally unmoored vision for the end of time? Is this the messianic age realized in human history? Or is there something else going on here? Here we have God speaking to Isaiah, and Corey Driver, our commentator, writes, "One of my favorite interlocutors of Scripture is an 11th century CE French sage, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, better known by the acronym Rashi. Insists that we read the promise of Isaiah 11 in light of the words of Isaiah 10. In the previous chapter from our lectionary readings, God has given the northern kingdom of Israel and many of the cities of Judah into the murderous hands of the kings of Assyria. Why? God, through Isaiah, wants the people to know why they will be judged. Woe to those who enact unjust statutes, and to those who constantly record harmful decisions, so as to deprive the needy of justice and rob the poor among my people of their rights, so that the widows may be their spoil, and that they may plunder the orphans." Here we see how the kings and how the leaders justified their injustices. Bad governance supported the rich and powerful becoming more rich and more powerful at the expense of the already poor and marginalized. The wealth and power gap extend to such an extent that the powerful were able to codify laws to justify their injustice. God also condemned the Israelites as a godless people. God would allow the Syrians to destroy a kingdom built on the twin sins of injustice and idolatry. But God also promised that the Assyrians would not go unpunished for their destruction of the lives of God's people. The Assyrians too would be crushed and destroyed. But how is the destruction of the people who destroyed Israel and much of Judah hopeful? Sure, revenge feels good for a time. Seeing the people who hurt us being hurt in turn may satisfy some notions of justice. But God has a better hope and future in store for the whole world than just reciprocity. This is a situation into which Isaiah 11 begins to speak hope. God promises through the prophet that a shoot will come from Jesse, and thereby David's stem, and a twig will grow from his roots. Christians will naturally see these words as speaking of Jesus, but for centuries before the incarnation, and in Jewish interpretation afterward, these words applied to King Hezekiah of Judea. Indeed, the first section of the book of Isaiah closes with a prose interlude that reads like a climax of a novel, wondering if Hezekiah will be the one to save the people or not. Hezekiah certainly had a lot going for him. His efforts to eliminate idolatry, reform the Levitical and priestly roles, rededicate the aristocracy to worshiping the God of Israel, and welcome back apostate Israelites to the holy festival in Jerusalem were so well known that even the enemies of Judah spoke of them. Judahites and Israelites seeking asylum after the destruction of Samaria would have wondered if Hezekiah would be the one about whom Isaiah spoke. Certainly he seemed to be guided by the Spirit of the Lord with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge and fear of the Lord. At a time when Israel had been destroyed by the Assyrians because of a lack of justice for the poor and faithfulness to God, Hezekiah stood out because he judged the poor with righteousness and decided with fairness for the humble of the earth. Indeed, righteousness seemed to be the belt around his hips, and faithfulness seemed to cling to him like a belt around his waist. The words of Isaiah 11 seem to confirm suspicions that Hezekiah would bring the world to peace and make a war a thing of the past, to realize a time when the lion would lie down with the lamb. But it was not to be. Hezekiah instituted important reforms, to be sure, but did not bring an end to war and fighting. Perhaps this brings to us the question, right? Will humanity ever learn? Hundreds of years later, the holy community lived under the threat of a violent people, perhaps even worse than the Assyrians. The Romans had been invited to support their vassals in the Herodian family as they inflicted injustice and violence on the people. Into this milieu, into a family too poor to present the prime offering for the birth of a son, a child was born and grew to proclaim the kingdom of heaven with its ways of justice and faithfulness. As in the days of Hezekiah and in the days of Jesus, we still waiting for that dawn in which the war shall cease. But if we refuse to uproot Isaiah from its context, we can see that God has always been calling the holy community to justice and faithfulness, and has always promised to send leaders who will show its way. It is such a leader that we, along with Isaiah, look for during this Advent. So let's end with a few questions. Does Isaiah's vision of the peaceable kingdom apply to nations today? If so, how? If not, why? It's a great question and kind of relies one to really think about for a minute. If we look to this question, I think we can answer it both ways. We can say, if yes, if we do see Isaiah's vision of the peaceable kingdom as applicable today, I think that it's a vision that brings to us hope. If we say no, I think we could say that this is a vision of a future, of something yet to come for God's people. So either way, I think we can look at it either way. The prophet says, the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord. What does this say about God's plan for salvation? I think this tells us, in my mind, that God's plan for salvation still has a ways to go, that everyone needs to hear of the Lord yet, And another question for us would be, what does it look like when the earth is full of knowledge of the Lord? And perhaps it goes back to that question of humanity. Will we ever learn? Even if, assuming everyone has heard the word of the Lord and is full of the knowledge of the Lord, then I think that means that this world will change in a drastic way. Well, I hope these questions give you some food for thought for this week. And during the second week of Advent, I hope you have time to reflect upon them and to reflect upon the season of waiting for our King. Blessings to you this week.